Pelican Bay Files, what they don't want you to know about America's Supermax. The sound was unlike anything else, a metallic scream echoing through the concrete tunnels of Pelican Bay. At 3:17 a.m., the control booth lights flickered red, and a guard's trembling voice cracked through the radio. "We've got movement in the SHU corridor. Cell B214 just opened on its own." But here's the thing, no one had a key. That door was supposed to stay locked for 23 hours a day, 7 days a week. Inside the cell was empty. No inmate. No body. No sign of forced exit. The only thing left behind was a small notebook, sealed inside a plastic food wrap wedged behind the toilet. On the front cover, scratched in pencil, "The Pelican Bay Files, they can't hide this forever." The guard who found it quit 2 days later. And according to internal reports, that notebook was lost during transfer. But unofficially, copies began to leak, handwritten pages that detailed things no one was ever supposed to see. Secret cell experiments. Unauthorized isolation programs. Psychological tests that made inmates lose their grip on reality. And the deeper investigators dug, the more they realized that America's most secure Supermax prison might have been hiding something far worse than violent men. That's where our story begins. The prison that wasn't supposed to exist. Pelican Bay State Prison sits in the far northwest corner of California, practically touching Oregon. When you look at it on a map, it's easy to miss. A gray dot surrounded by endless forests and fog. When construction began in 1989, officials called it a modern solution for modern criminals. California was drowning in violence then, gang wars, overcrowded prisons, riots in San Quentin and Folsom. The public wanted safety and politicians wanted a headline. So they built Pelican Bay. Not just another prison, a Supermax. A facility designed to break the most violent, unpredictable, and uncooperative men in the system. The prison's blueprints were never meant to look humane. Every design choice was calculated, to control the mind as much as the body. Cells were built 8 by 10 feet. No windows, just a slit that let in a blade of sunlight. The walls were polished concrete, echoing every breath. Each inmate was allowed 1 hour a day in a concrete yard, alone, surrounded by 20-foot walls and a metal grate above. They called it the SHU, the Security Housing Unit. But the men who lived there had another name for it. The box. Guards didn't walk these halls, they monitored them from electronic booths behind bulletproof glass. Doors opened remotely. Meals slid through steel slots. No human contact. No sound except for the constant hum of the ventilation system. To the outside world, Pelican Bay was a symbol of control. To those inside, it was something else entirely, a laboratory. The experiments. In 1993, a leaked memo from the California Department of Corrections mentioned a project called Operation Quiet Storm. It was described as a behavioral management protocol for high-risk inmates. But the memo never reached the press. That's because the term behavioral management was a sanitized phrase for extreme isolation. Inside the SHU, men spent years without touching another human being. Some went decades. Psychologists warned that the program was turning prisoners into something else. Men who would hallucinate voices, forget language, or beg to be executed rather than left alone. But it was working. Gang activity inside California's prisons dropped. Riots declined. Pelican Bay became the model for future Supermax facilities, including ADX Florence in Colorado. Still, a few guards started noticing things that didn't make sense. Security cameras would show inmates staring at walls for hours, unmoving. Medical logs recorded sudden weight loss, sleep paralysis, and unexplained tremors. Some claimed to see faces in the concrete, others wrote messages backwards on their cell doors. One officer, Marcus Leary, later said in a deposition, "You could tell time just by when they started screaming. Around midnight, it always began in waves. One cell then another. Like they were hearing the same thing." The forgotten lawsuit. In 1995, a civil rights attorney named Stephen Rosenfeld filed a lawsuit, Madrid versus Gomez. He accused Pelican Bay of operating under inhumane and unconstitutional conditions. The case blew open the first cracks in the Supermax's walls. During the hearings, Judge Thelton Henderson toured the SHU himself. He described it as a windowless world that breeds madness. In his 1995 ruling, he confirmed what everyone feared. Guards had used unnecessary force, inmates were subjected to psychological torture, and medical neglect was rampant. It was the first time a U.S. federal court declared that Pelican Bay's SHU conditions violated the Eighth Amendment, the one banning cruel and unusual punishment. The judgment forced some reforms, but only on paper. Because the system didn't shut down. It evolved. The hunger strike. Fast forward to July 2011. Inside Pelican Bay, over 6,000 inmates across California joined one of the largest prison hunger strikes in U.S. history. Their demand? End long-term solitary confinement. The strike started with men from rival gangs, Mexican Mafia, Aryan Brotherhood, Black Guerrilla Family, and Northern Structure, agreeing to something no one thought possible: a peace treaty inside the SHU. They stopped eating. They refused recreation. They sent letters to journalists and families on the outside, exposing what life was truly like in Pelican Bay. One inmate's letter read, "We are not asking for freedom. We're asking to be treated like human beings again. To see the sky. To hear another voice." After 3 weeks, dozens were hospitalized. The strike spread to other prisons statewide. And that's when corrections officials realized, this wasn't just a protest. It was a revelation. The public began asking, what's really going on inside Pelican Bay? The secret files. According to internal reports leaked in 2013, a special programs division existed within Pelican Bay, separate from normal operations. Its mandate: monitor and document psychological deterioration rates among isolated inmates. The records were stored under project codes like Echo Cell, Condition Red, and Delta Watch. But here's the kicker. None of those programs were ever authorized by the California Department of Corrections main office. Meaning, someone higher or outside had been running these studies. Whistleblowers claimed federal contractors were involved. Neuroscience divisions tied to military psychological research. And they were using Pelican Bay's SHU as the perfect testing ground. Why? Because everything inside was already classified. No cameras, no public access, and no internet connection. Perfect conditions for secrets. The guard who spoke. In 2015, a retired guard named John Sanders went public with an interview for The Intercept. He described something called the White Room. According to him, it wasn't on any blueprint. We'd take certain inmates there. High-risk ones. The ones they said couldn't be rehabilitated. No windows. Bright lights 24/7. After 48 hours, most would start talking to themselves. After 72, they'd sign whatever confession you put in front of them. But after that interview, Sanders disappeared from public life. No social media. No forwarding address. His lawyer refused further comment. And that brings us back to the notebook. The missing pages. In 2017, during a routine cell inspection, officers found handwritten notes in a hidden vent near the SHU's D block. The handwriting matched Carlos Meza, an inmate linked to the 2011 strike. Meza had been placed in isolation for inciting unrest. But according to transfer logs, he died of a heart attack months before the discovery. The pages described something horrifying. They said the light was therapy. But the light never went off. After a while, you can't tell if your eyes are open or closed. You start to see shadows moving where there shouldn't be any. They watch you even when you sleep. The final line read, "Pelican Bay isn't a prison. It's a mirror. And the longer you stare into it, the more it starts staring back." Those pages were supposed to be submitted as evidence. Instead, they were classified under security compromise, confidential. And the box they were stored in? Labeled simply, the Pelican Bay Files. The incident. On April 19, 2018 at 2:47 a.m., multiple sensors in D block recorded simultaneous cell door failures. 3 cameras went offline. Power briefly flickered across the SHU. By morning, a single inmate was unaccounted for. Derek Lang, convicted of double homicide, serving life without parole. The official report said possible administrative error. Unofficially, no trace of Lang was ever found. No body. No escape footage. No alarms. The only footage recovered showed a faint silhouette walking through the corridor, and then disappearing into static. Guards later found writing on Lang's cell wall, scratched with what looked like metal fragments. "We were never the experiments. We were the control." Operation Quiet Storm. The documents didn't surface in a newsroom. They appeared in a brown envelope dropped at the doorstep of an investigative journalist in Sacramento. Elena Cruz, a name that meant trouble for anyone in power. She was known for digging into dark corners, police misconduct, prison cover-ups, corporate hush-money cases. But this envelope was different. No return address. No sender's name. Just 3 words on the front, written in blue ink. "Read before they do." Inside were scanned pages stamped confidential, CDC or internal use only. They detailed something called Operation Quiet Storm, dated back to 1991, 2 years after Pelican Bay opened its gates. At first glance, it looked like a behavior control study, a state-funded psychological evaluation of inmates placed in solitary confinement. But the deeper she read, the less it made sense. Because the names listed under program oversight weren't prison officials. They were contractors, tied to defense and neurological research. One of them was Dr. Michael Sandhurst, a neurobehavioral scientist who'd previously worked at DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, the same organization known for creating stealth technology and early artificial intelligence prototypes. According to the files, Dr. Sandhurst and his team were granted access to Pelican Bay's SHU units for behavioral stimulus testing. But what was stimulus testing doing inside a prison? The objective: silence the noise. To understand Operation Quiet Storm, you have to understand the chaos of the 1980s prison era. Gang wars were bleeding through the walls. The Mexican Mafia, Aryan Brotherhood, Black Guerrilla Family, and Nuestra Familia ran entire facilities. Phones, drugs, weapons, even guards were under gang payroll. California's prison board believed isolation could starve the organism. Cut off communication and you cut off the power. So when Sandhurst proposed a containment-based modification experiment, they saw a solution. His theory: if you remove all sensory input, light, sound, touch, the human brain would begin to reprogram itself. In theory, aggression would collapse. In practice, it destroyed people. One of the earliest test subjects, identified only as inmate 47A, lasted 36 days before he began hallucinating voices. He scratched the words, "Can you hear them?" into his arm using his fingernails. When Elena cross-checked the ID with old Pelican Bay intake logs, she found the name: Raymond Cortez, a gang dropout from Los Angeles. Official cause of death: self-inflicted wound. Unofficially, guards told investigators his cell light never turned off, even after his death. The journalist who went too far. Elena Cruz wasn't content reading paper trails. She wanted footage. Evidence. So in late 2018 she drove to Crescent City and rented a small cabin near the Redwood Forest, just 10 miles from the prison. The area was cold, damp, and eerily silent. Locals didn't talk much about Pelican Bay, except to warn her not to go near the East Perimeter Road at night. One bartender told her, "You'll hear sounds sometimes, like someone tapping metal inside the walls. Don't stop your car. Don't look back." Cruz smiled it off, but kept her recorder running that night as she parked near the access road. At 2:12 a.m. her dashcam captured something strange. A convoy of 3 unmarked vans, escorted by a single prison vehicle, driving toward a restricted area of the facility, Sector D, also known as the old SHU Annex. That area was supposedly decommissioned years ago. The next morning she returned to the same spot. The tire marks were still fresh. And near the fence line, buried under mud, she found a plastic badge fragment, the kind used for internal staff clearance. The letters were faded but still visible. SN. The call from inside. 2 weeks later she got a call from an unknown number. "Is this Cruz? Stop looking into Pelican Bay. They'll make you disappear like they did him." She tried to ask who him was, but the line went dead. 3 hours later her phone buzzed again, a text from a prepaid number. "Check file 7B in the court archives, Madrid vs. Gomez." She did. And there it was, an evidence list sealed under judicial order. Item 7B, Video Documentation, Psychological Observation, SHU Inmate Number 124. The document was classified, but its description was chilling. Subject displays induced sleep deprivation response during sustained isolation. Symptoms: vocal hallucinations, self-harm, repetitive prayer-like murmurs in unknown language. The note beneath it read, "Test observed by Sandhurst, M. Session concluded upon subject collapse. Status: deceased." This wasn't a rehabilitation program. It was experimentation under the disguise of correction. The last interview. In January 2019, Cruz managed to contact Daniel Holbrook, a retired Pelican Bay psychologist who'd worked there during the early years. He was living quietly in Eureka, California. At first he refused to talk. Then, over coffee and a trembling hand, he began to open up. "They told us it was about rehabilitation. About understanding the criminal mind. But when the funding started coming from Washington, everything changed." He described a hidden wing beneath the main SHU, a sublevel where special inmates were kept for behavioral research. He said it wasn't on the official blueprints, but every staffer knew about it. They called it the echo block. According to Holbrook, sensors in the echo block monitored brainwave activity, heart rate, and emotional stability patterns. He believed Sandhurst was testing how much mental isolation a human brain could handle before breaking, and whether it could be reversed. They were trying to map trauma, he said. But somewhere along the line they stopped caring about fixing it. Holbrook quit after an inmate died during one of these sessions. He claimed the body was never logged, never autopsied, and never listed in the system. The leak. In March 2019, Elena uploaded an encrypted file dump to a private journalist network. It contained all her notes, photographs, and documents about Pelican Bay. She called it Project Echo. But before she could publish the main exposé, her cabin caught fire. The local sheriff's report said it was caused by a space heater. Yet firefighters found no heater in the debris, only melted remnants of electronics, camera drives, and a burned phone. Her laptop's SSD, however, survived. When technicians recovered its contents, they found one final video clip recorded from her dashcam on the night of the fire. The footage lasted exactly 23 seconds. It showed Cruz sitting in her car, whispering into the camera, "If you're watching this, something's happened. They're using the SHU again, but not for punishment. For control. You have no idea what's coming." Then, a blinding white flash. Static. Silence. Aftermath. When her story hit the national stage, state officials called it conspiracy. The California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation (CDCR) denied the existence of Operation Quiet Storm or any experimental programs within Pelican Bay. But just 1 week later, a Freedom of Information Act request uncovered a budget allocation from 1992 labeled Neural Behavior Containment Study. The funding source? A federal defense contractor, Halden Systems Incorporated. The same company had previous contracts at Guantanamo Bay and Fort Detrick. Suddenly the dots began to connect. Pelican Bay wasn't just a prison, it was a testing ground. And the people inside weren't just inmates. They were data points. The return of the SHU. In 2021, despite years of legal reform, reports emerged that parts of Pelican Bay's old SHU had been quietly reopened. Officials called it administrative segregation for high-risk cases. But whistleblowers inside the CDCR claimed something else. A new wave of psychological conditioning protocols under a revised project name, NeuroAdapt. According to one leaked memo, NeuroAdapt's purpose was behavior stabilization through predictive environmental control. In simpler terms, they were trying to read, and then rewrite, behavior patterns. And Pelican Bay was still the lab. The unanswered questions. So what exactly were they testing? What did Sandhurst and his successors hope to find? The last page in Cruz's recovered notebook might hold the answer. Written in her own handwriting. If Quiet Storm was about silence, then NeuroAdapt is about control. They learned that the mind breaks in isolation. But what if they could build something new from the pieces? The final words underlined 3 times. They were never rehabilitating prisoners, they were programming them. As of today, Dr. Michael Sandhurst has vanished from public records. His listed residence in Arlington, Virginia, has been abandoned since 2017. Federal tax records show no activity. And yet, his ID tag from Pelican Bay was logged into the visitor system as recently as June 2021. Who authorized it? No one knows. And just when the state thought the files were buried for good, a new whistleblower stepped forward, a current guard with first-hand access to the SHU. He said something that froze every investigator in the room. You think Pelican Bay's about inmates? You're looking in the wrong direction. We're the ones being studied now. NeuroAdapt, the program that shouldn't exist. The year was 2022, and Pelican Bay's name had begun to fade from headlines. The public thought the hunger strikes were over, that reforms had cleaned the system. But deep inside California's Department of Corrections, a quiet storm was brewing again, this time under a new name, NeuroAdapt. On paper, NeuroAdapt sounded harmless, even progressive. Official memos described it as a data-driven rehabilitation model that uses environmental cues to influence inmate behavior. But those who worked closest to the program said it was nothing short of behavioral engineering. To understand what was really happening, we need to look at the audit that nearly exposed it. The federal audit. In April 2022, a joint audit between the U.S. Department of Justice and the Office of the Inspector General (OIG) was launched to review California's spending on prison mental health modernization. Buried in thousands of digital transactions, auditors found something odd. An untraceable fund labeled Adaptive Neural Containment Systems, Fiscal YR 2021. It had no public record, no vendor, and no clear spending purpose. But when they traced the fund's routing number, it led to a shell account in Del Norte County, the same county that houses Pelican Bay State Prison. And the signature that authorized the transfer? Sandhurst. The same man who supposedly vanished 4 years earlier. When investigators requested the original contracts, CDCR legal counsel claimed the documents were misplaced. A week later, two of the auditors, Agent Laura Kim and Agent David Moreno, resigned without explanation. Their resignation letters were identical. Typed and signed and dated the same day. Both auditors disappeared from public record within a month. The whistleblower. That's when a man using the alias Rook reached out to a small investigative podcast called The Locked Files. He claimed to be a guard at Pelican Bay, specifically within the reopened wing known as Administrative Segregation Unit East, which he said was a cover name for the NeuroAdapt site. His voice in the interview was modulated, but his fear was unmistakable. They call it behavioral conditioning, but it's not therapy. It's control. They monitor every inmate's reaction to light, temperature, and even sound frequencies. The cells aren't just concrete anymore, they're wired. He explained that the SHU cells had been upgraded with embedded microsensors behind the walls, capable of tracking heart rate, sleep cycles, and emotional responses using vibrations and motion capture. But the most chilling claim came next. The system doesn't just read them anymore. It can react. If an inmate shows aggression, the lighting shifts. If they show despair, the ventilation changes. They say it's to calm them down. But we've seen men come out of those cells like blank slates. No rage. No fear. No emotion at all. When the podcast aired the clip, it was removed from every platform within 12 hours due to a copyright complaint, filed by a company named Halden Systems, the same defense contractor from Operation Quiet Storm. The data trail. Meanwhile, a cybersecurity researcher named Travis Hume, who'd been following Elena Cruz's case, began digging into the audit files. What he found connected the dots. Pelican Bay had installed a new digital control system in 2020 called Vigil Core, produced by, you guessed it, Halden Systems Inc. Officially, Vigil Core was meant to modernize inmate monitoring. But Hume discovered that it connected directly to an encrypted federal server in Maryland, under the project tag, NDAPSI-13, short for NeuroAdapt Prison Stimulus Integration. In other words, inmate behavior data was being exported out of California. What kind of data? Everything. Speech patterns from intercom logs. Movement tracking from hallway sensors. Biological rhythms from smart wristbands distributed under health reform programs. Even journal entries scanned and analyzed for emotional sentiment. It was all being fed into an algorithm that classified each inmate's mental elasticity index. In other words, how easy they were to psychologically reshape. Hume leaked screenshots to independent journalists. One report showed a chilling summary line. Subject 0821B. Compliance achieved after 132 environmental iterations. Recommended for Phase 3 replication. The subject was an inmate named Robert Holloway, serving a life sentence for armed robbery. When reporters tried to locate him, his record had been sealed. When they contacted his listed family, they said Robert had been transferred out of state. But no federal facility had any record of him. It was as if he'd been deleted. Inside the SHU. In September 2022, a former Pelican Bay maintenance worker, Ernesto Alvarez, came forward after being fired for unauthorized photography. He'd taken pictures of what he claimed were new SHU cells, installed in the previously closed Echo block, mentioned by Dr. Holbrook years earlier. The photos were grainy, but one thing stood out. The walls were lined with hexagonal patterns, not concrete but composite panels with fiber optic seams. According to Alvarez, those panels weren't just walls, they were part of a neural feedback grid. They could change color, brightness, even pulse patterns. Sometimes you'd walk by a cell and it'd be glowing faint blue. Other times deep red. The inmates would either freeze up or start crying. He recalled one inmate begging him, whispering through the vent. "They know what I dream about. They play the same sound until I can't tell if I'm awake." When Alvarez tried to report it, his ID was deactivated the next day. He left the state and hasn't returned since. The code word Phase 3. By late 2022, the word Phase 3 started appearing across internal CDCR correspondence. Emails between regional directors referenced Phase 3 transition subjects and integration with Phase 2 archives. Travis Hume managed to decrypt one attached PDF, a PowerPoint slide titled NeuroAdapt Cognitive Reset, Beta Summary. It outlined a shocking new claim. The system was being tested to repurpose long-term inmates as low-risk cognitive control models for future correctional staff training. Put simply, they were trying to turn inmates into test subjects for programming obedience. The last slide read, Objective: reduce cognitive dissonance in personnel through adaptive empathy modulation. Pilot success rate, 87%. Testing site, PBSP East. PBSP, Pelican Bay State Prison. The pattern. By 2023, reports began circulating among correctional staff statewide. Guards at other California facilities, Corcoran, Tehachapi, even San Quentin, started describing the same thing. Behavioral stabilization wings. These units had no visible difference, but everyone noticed one thing: the silence. No shouting. No noise. Just men who sat perfectly still, staring at the walls. A psychiatrist from Corcoran told the Sacramento Bee, "It's like their emotions were switched off. They follow orders, eat, sleep, and speak only when spoken to. But their eyes don't track movement like normal people anymore." Experts suspected these were the NeuroAdapt graduates, inmates conditioned to complete compliance. But where were they going afterward? That's where things get darker. The transfers. Between 2021 and 2023, over 212 inmates were listed as transferred to federal custody from Pelican Bay. But when cross-checked with Federal Bureau of Prisons data, only 148 were recorded. That left 64 missing inmates. When questioned, the CDCR claimed clerical errors. But internal memos told a different story. One memo, labeled confidential, beta clearance required, said, "Participants reassigned to external facility under Halden's supervision. Do not enter into public database until project closure." External facility? Halden wasn't a corrections company. It was a defense contractor. And its listed research site? A decommissioned training base in Nevada's Black Rock Desert. The ghost data. In December 2023, cybersecurity researcher Hume returned to the Vigil Core servers to verify whether the data pipeline was still active. It was. But something new had appeared, a shadow directory labeled Legacy Echo Archive. Inside were compressed folders containing old project data from Operation Quiet Storm. The timestamps ranged from 1991 to 1997. And among the file names was one that froze Hume in place. Echo _deathbit. Derek Lang, the inmate who vanished in 2018. He decrypted the file. The video was grainy, black and white, time-stamped April 20, 2018, one day after Lang's disappearance. It showed a small cell bathed in bright white light. Lang was sitting perfectly still, facing the camera. Then a flicker. He raised his head and stared directly into the lens. His lips moved slowly, forming words Hume could barely make out. When he enhanced the audio, the voice said, "They said I'd see the world differently. But now, I am the world." Then the screen went black. The final frame displayed a line of system text. Echo integration complete. Subject stable. That was the last file in the directory. The investigation vanishes. By early 2024, multiple journalists attempted to pursue the NeuroAdapt story. But one by one, their articles were pulled for verification issues. Major news outlets refused to touch it. Even The Intercept, which had once exposed similar programs, quietly took down its earlier Pelican Bay coverage. A whistleblower from inside a major media company later admitted, "We got a national security letter. They said publication could compromise ongoing defense operations." So now the story lives in fragments. Reddit posts, encrypted leaks, deleted tweets. But among those fragments, one post stands out. It was from a user claiming to be a Pelican Bay nurse. She wrote, "They say we're helping them reintegrate into society. But the men leaving this place aren't the same ones who arrived. It's like someone wiped their memories clean. They don't talk, they don't dream. They just obey." Her account was deleted 2 days later. And yet, the lights remain on. Satellite imagery from February 2025 shows Pelican Bay's East Wing fully operational. Thermal scans reveal activity consistent with nighttime testing, power surges, generator use, and irregular heating cycles within the SHU's lower levels. Officially, Pelican Bay remains a reduced operation facility. Unofficially, the hum of those walls hasn't stopped. Some guards still claim that at 3:17 a.m., the same time the original notebook was found years ago, the lights in D Block flicker for exactly 11 seconds. Every single night. No one can explain it. And if the rumors are true, that Phase 4 is already underway, Then Pelican Bay isn't just a prison anymore. It's a prototype. The Nevada facility. The Mojave wind carried no sound, only dust and heat. About 100 miles northeast of Reno, an unmarked dirt road cut through the wasteland like a scar. At the end of that road stood a cluster of metallic hangars half buried in the sand, surrounded by motion sensors and chain-link fences. Locals called it Site 9. The government called it a decommissioned training facility. But for those who knew where the money came from, it was something else entirely. The new home of Phase 4. The Black Rock Transfer. In late 2024, a freight convoy left Crescent City under heavy escort. Official manifests listed it as electronic waste for disposal. Satellite tracking from open-source observers showed that convoy heading east across Nevada. It never arrived at any disposal site. 2 weeks later, radio hobbyists in Reno intercepted a scrambled transmission on a restricted frequency. The call sign matched Halden Systems Inc. 3 words were repeated before the signal cut out. Initiated. The desert facility. Blueprints later leaked to the public showed that Site 9 wasn't a dump. It was an underground lab built over an old Cold War bunker. The documents, dated 2019, described 4 levels. Surface deck, disguised as an energy storage plant. Observation hub, housing neural pattern monitoring servers. Containment block, a climate-controlled isolation ward. Mirror level, access restricted to personnel with Omega clearance. The mirror level had no official function. Its only description in the schematics, adaptive response environment. When journalists requested clarification from the Department of Defense, they were told, no such structure exists. The Mirror Project. Internal Halden memos recovered from a cyber leak outlined Phase 4's goal. To synchronize human behavioral signatures with environmental control matrices. In plain English, create a closed system where people's emotions could be mirrored, recorded, and reprojected back at them until they lost the ability to tell the difference between what they felt and what was being induced. The tests required human subjects already acclimated to isolation. That's where the Pelican Bay graduates came in. Officially, they'd been transferred for vocational retraining. Unofficially, they became the first mirror subjects. Witness 001. A truck driver known only as Frank D. later told an independent reporter that he'd once delivered food to the facility. He said he was instructed never to speak to anyone inside and to keep his eyes down when unloading. But one day as he was leaving, he caught a glimpse through a glass corridor. There were maybe 10 of them sitting in chairs facing a wall of light. The light was moving, like a heartbeat. They didn't blink. They didn't breathe heavy. It was like they weren't people anymore. He quit the next morning. A week later, his trucking license was revoked for security violations. The scientist, Dr. Marina Kessler, a cognitive neuroscientist who once worked under Sandhurst, resurfaced in Germany in early 2025. In an interview with Der Spiegel, she confirmed what many feared. Pelican Bay was the pilot. Nevada is the application. They learn to erase fear responses, then rebuild them. You can't weaponize obedience without first mastering despair. She provided one image, a screenshot of an internal Halden dashboard labeled Mirror Cohort 02. Each subject was listed with 2 metrics, compliance rate and echo stability. The higher the echo stability, the less deviation between a person's own thoughts and the stimuli fed back to them. One subject's line was highlighted in red, Subject D. Lang, a stability 99.4%. Derek Lang, the man who vanished from Pelican Bay 6 years earlier. Echo resonance. According to Kessler, Phase 4 involved broadcasting recorded emotional patterns through subsonic frequencies and light modulation. Each subject's brainwaves were mirrored in real time and rebroadcast, trapping them in a closed feedback loop. The longer the loop ran, the more their neural identity blurred. In simple terms, they were teaching the human brain to surrender to external control. The program's code name came from its core mechanism, echo resonance. Once established, the subject's brain could be tuned remotely to match any desired behavioral profile. Peaceful, aggressive, apathetic, like flipping a switch. The military connection. Through congressional budget hearings, analysts discovered that the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, had issued a contract in 2023 titled Adaptive Soldier Conditioning Interface. The contractor listed? Halden Systems. The description was vague, but the funding, over $180 million, was unmistakable. It coincided exactly with the reopening of Pelican Bay's East Wing. Former defense staffers later confirmed that the goal was to study how environmental conditioning could reduce hesitation in combat scenarios. If a mind could be trained to respond without emotional interference, it could follow any order, without question. But before such technology could be applied to soldiers, it needed testing. Not in labs. In prisons. The Red Line event. In February 2025, satellite imagery picked up a brief power surge over Site 9, followed by a 90-second blackout across several counties. Local seismographs recorded low-frequency vibrations, the kind consistent with underground explosions. No official explanation was given, but a week later, an anonymous email reached multiple journalists. It contained one sentence and an attached image. They tried to shut it off. The echoes wouldn't stop. The photo appeared to show the inside of a chamber, walls melted, wires twisted, yet no human remains were visible. Only shadows burned into the metal panels, 10 of them all seated. The image metadata matched the timestamp of the blackout. Aftermath. Within days, Halden Systems filed for bankruptcy and dissolved. Its assets were absorbed by a new entity, Cenix Dynamics, based in Reston, Virginia. The CEO listed was Michael Sandhurst. And just like that, every trace of Pelican Bay's connection vanished from public databases. The NeuroAdapt contracts were sealed under the National Defense Authorization Act, citing public safety concerns. But a final leak appeared 3 weeks later, a short video clip uploaded to the dark web. The footage showed an empty desert road at night, shot from a moving vehicle. In the reflection of the rearview mirror, faint lights pulsed behind the driver, slow rhythmic flashes like a heartbeat. A voice, familiar, calm male, spoke over the static. Phase 4 achieved. Integration complete. The mirror no longer reflects. It absorbs. Then the feed cut out. Back in Crescent City. Meanwhile, guards at Pelican Bay began reporting something impossible. Even though the old SHU was sealed, they could still hear faint humming beneath the floor at night. Like distant machinery coming alive. A senior officer wrote in his incident log. Every time the power flickers, the walls seem to breathe. We were told it's just leftover wiring, but sometimes, the lights flash in patterns. Same sequence every time, 3 short, 1 long, 3 short. That pattern wasn't random. It matched the same code sequence used to initialize NeuroAdapt's feedback loop. The SHU long thought dead was answering back. The file that survived. A week later, a journalist in San Francisco received a USB drive in an unmarked envelope. The drive contained one folder titled Mirror_Backup. Inside was a single text document. They didn't stop at prisoners. They used us to perfect the loop. The next test isn't in prisons, it's everywhere. The network's name, Vigil Core Cloud. The file ended with GPS coordinates. When plotted on a map, the point landed exactly between Pelican Bay and Site 9. A narrow valley of forest, rivers, and fog. Someone, or something, was still bridging the two worlds. The question now wasn't what Pelican Bay had been hiding. It was who had taken its place. And whether the echoes had ever really stopped. The echo goes global. The Nevada blackout was supposed to be the end. But in early 2025, reports of unexplained signal interference began surfacing from places that had nothing to do with prisons. Public libraries, traffic light systems, even hospital monitors. All of them shared one thing in common, a firmware component labeled Vigil Core Cloud version 3.1. At first it looked like a coincidence, until someone recognized the name. Vigil Core had started as a prison management platform. Now it was quietly embedded inside state infrastructure under a new initiative called Civic Harmony Network. The project promised AI-assisted stress detection for public safety. To anyone reading a press release, it sounded like progress. To those who'd followed Pelican Bay's story, it sounded like déjà vu. The silent update. Across California, street cameras began receiving software patches overnight. There were no announcements, no change logs, just a line in the state budget, Digital Public Behavior Monitoring Pilot. Within weeks, commuters noticed subtle changes. Crosswalk signals lingered a second longer when crowds grew tense. Billboards dimmed during rush hour, claiming to reduce stress. Then came the hum, barely audible, a low tone beneath the city noise. Engineers traced the signal back to Server Hub Delta, a data center outside Sacramento. The operating contractor, Cenix Dynamics, the new shell that had swallowed Halden Systems. When investigators compared Delta's network protocols with archived Pelican Bay files, the match rate was 96%. The same code that once read the emotions of isolated inmates was now scanning entire cities. The echo pattern. Doctors in Los Angeles began noticing a rise in patients reporting identical dreams. White rooms, pulsing lights, rhythmic sound. Neurologists dismissed it as mass suggestion until an ER nurse, who had never heard of Pelican Bay, collapsed during a night shift, whispering, "It's too bright again." Her EEG showed oscillations identical to those recorded from the NeuroAdapt trials. The echo pattern, a wave signature once confined to concrete cells, was now appearing in civilians. Some theorized the visual core network was accidentally emitting resonant frequencies. Others believed it wasn't an accident at all. The last transmission. In April 2025, Travis Hume, the same researcher who had uncovered the visual core servers, posted a final update on an encrypted forum. His post read, "They turned Pelican Bay into a prototype city. Phase 5 isn't containment, it's calibration. Every connected sensor is an ear. Every screen a mirror." Attached was a short audio clip recorded from his apartment window in San Jose, a slow, rhythmic hum at 3.17 Hz, the same frequency as the nightly flicker in Pelican Bay's D block. 3 hours after posting, Hume's account was deleted. His apartment was found empty, computer wiped, front door still locked from the inside. The government response. Public outrage flared when tech journalists connected Visual Core Cloud to Halden's prison research. Senators demanded hearings. Agencies promised transparency. A joint task force was formed to audit Senex dynamics. But before any subpoenas could be served, Senex filed for federal protection under a national security directive. All documents became classified. The hearings were canceled. And just like that, the story disappeared from the news cycle. Again. Return to Pelican Bay. That summer, a drone hobbyist flew over Crescent City and captured thermal images of the prison. Despite official claims that Pelican Bay's east wing was closed, heat signatures glowed from every corridor. The hum still rose at 3:17 a.m. sharp. Locals said when the fog rolled in, you could see faint flashes beneath the ground, like heartbeat pulses through the soil. When questioned, prison officials gave the same answer every time. There's nothing there to worry about. But those who had read the files knew better. Pelican Bay was never about punishment. It was about prediction. And now, prediction had become policy. The echo everywhere. By late 2025, the Harmony Network extended into education, traffic control, and healthcare. Algorithms predicted behavioral stress zones and adjusted lighting, temperature, even music in public spaces. People called it the calm era. Crimes dropped, protests dwindled, and the streets grew quieter than ever. Too quiet. An independent coder in Portland found a hidden subroutine inside the Harmony API. It transmitted aggregate, emotional data to a central hub labeled Echo Core. Coordinates pointed straight to the Nevada desert. The Mirror project hadn't ended. It had simply scaled up. The final note. Weeks later, an anonymous video surfaced online. A dimly lit room. A single voice, hoarse, tired, familiar. Elena Cruz. She had survived. They built a loop so wide it covers all of us now. You won't see walls, but you'll feel them. Every time you scroll, every time you pause, every time you hesitate before saying what you really think. That's the new cell. And it's beautiful, because it doesn't look like a prison anymore. Then she smiled, just slightly, and the screen filled with static. Hidden in the final frame was text encoded in binary. When decoded, it read, Pelican Bay File 000, closed for public view. Phase 5 complete. Epilogue. Today, the official narrative says Pelican Bay operates at minimum capacity, housing fewer than 200 inmates. But every night at 3:17 a.m., the prison's lights still pulse 3 short, 1 long, 3 short. A Morse code echo of the past. No one admits to sending it. No one dares to answer back. Because if the echoes have truly spread beyond the walls, then perhaps the real experiment isn't about prisoners anymore. It's about us. If you've made it this far, you now know more than most people ever will about Pelican Bay. The files, the experiments, the names, they're real pieces of a system that was never meant to see daylight. And maybe that's why the lights still flicker at 3:17 a.m., a reminder that silence doesn't always mean peace. So what do you think? Was Pelican Bay an isolated nightmare, or the blueprint for something much larger? Let me know in the comments. If this story shook you, hit like, subscribe, and share this video, because truth only survives when it's told out loud. And in a world built on echoes, maybe your voice is the one thing they can't control.